Hello and welcome back. Today we've got not only another new release from a new distillery, but it's a new English distillery. And obviously I'm not biased at all when it comes to English whiskey. So this is Wireworks from White Peaks Distillery. So obviously a fantastic, attractive, lovely made and well thought out bottle. Design and label, all fantastic. And one of the things that I really want to point out about this that I really like, I don't think I've ever said this before, but it's the shrink wrap around the cork. And we'll get to why I like that so much in a little while. But the shrink wrap that you get on this that seals it when you buy it new, if you look at what it says around it, it's got 3 words, and that is heritage, which you can just about see there, flavour, provenance. And I absolutely love that. I've kept this shrink wrap for the last few weeks because I've had this for a while, just so I can show that to you guys, because I think that that's a really excellent mission statement for any new craft distillery. Heritage, flavour, provenance. It's really what it's all about, or what it should be about. I think that that kind of regional pride is really what England and English whiskey needs. So a little bit of information about the distillery, because I think this is one that's not really being shouted about enough. People have noticed it and the feedback has been very positive so far, but it's not really up there like the Isle of Raasay and the Ardnamurchan or even Wolfburn, things like that. It's a little bit of a sleeper. But the White Peaks Distillery is a brand new English distillery set up in 2016 in an old wire and cable factory in Derbyshire, and I absolutely love what they're doing here. I actually saw these guys on TV. They've been slowly making people more and more aware of them, but I think that it's really good that they're embracing and preserving the UK's industrial heritage. And also while they're at that, obviously if you're from England, you'll know that a lot is said about levelling up, and I agree with that. I think that the UK government, it pays a lot of attention to the southeast and in particular London, and they're very well looked after with infrastructure and jobs and opportunities and things like that. Outside of London, not so much, and especially if you live in, not even just in the north of England, but if you live outside of those cities, if you live somewhere that's a bit more isolated and rural, or one of those ex-industrial places, there are not many opportunities or infrastructure or anything here. So it's important that we have new companies like White Peaks Distillery who are embracing and preserving that heritage and moving forward and creating a better England for the future. And more than just levelling up, they're creating local jobs that actually produce something. So 10 out of 10 for that. More of that, please. And also amazing bottle, really beautiful bottle, and a great cork too. Corks are generally something that we don't talk about unless there's a problem. But looking at that cork, compared to some of the crappy composite corks where it's just a bunch of crumbs glued together, that's a solid, spongy, good seal, really good cork. And that matters if you're going to keep a whiskey long term. It's just, as I said, it doesn't matter a huge amount until there's a problem, but it just shows you that White Peaks is a distillery that cares about doing things properly. Speaking of doing things properly, what information do we have about this one? I'll just show you the label again, if that'll come into focus. So Wireworks, beautiful, understated, classy label in my opinion. Product of Derbyshire, England. Single malt English whiskey, small batch. Their logo is a little bit odd, but you can kind of see what they've gone with there. I don't know if that's meant to be a D and a B for Derbyshire perhaps, but you kind of get the feeling that it's like lines all linked together, so it kind of ties in with that Wireworks, cables and wires theme. But the other details that we've got on this one, we are told that this is natural colour, it's non-chill filtered, and it's 46.2%. It's matured in a combination of bourbon casks and STR casks, and we're told that it is a lightly peated style. So let's get some in the glass and see what it's like. I'm always excited when you see a new release, especially an English whiskey, and you just get the feeling that they've really gone the extra mile to do things properly, which these guys obviously have. So that is what a natural colour non-chill filtered whiskey looks like at 46.2%, but it's coming from a combination of bourbon and STR casks. So that's a slightly dark colour, but obviously that extra colour is coming through from those STR casks. Let's see how it smells. So the first thing that I'm going to say on the nose is the nose of this whiskey is light. And I said that the Ardnamurchan, which I really like, that was a little bit light as well, possibly because it's one of the more mature of these new distillery releases. But the nose on this Y-Works from White Peaks Distillery is light and slightly closed, at least on the start of the nose. Slight mustiness probably coming through from some of that lightly peated style that I mentioned. Tiniest hint of youth. You can tell that this is not an old whiskey, but there's really no disguising that. When you've got a distillery that was founded in 2016, the spirit that you've got is going to be young. Getting some faint lemon lime notes, as well as some jelly sweets, sort of like jelly babies, wine gums, and that's something that I quite often get from whiskies that are matured in STR casks. Also getting a tiny little hint of freshly sawn oak, which again is probably coming through from that STR. Quite a herbal quality on the nose of this whiskey. Kind of gin-like citrus notes. A little bit of vanilla, and I think probably a combination of that vanilla and some of those jelly confectionery notes. Reminds me a little bit of those jelly milk bottle sweets. So there are definitely some flavours there, and they're all pleasant flavours, but it is quite a subtle, closed nose. I think with or without water, there's not a huge amount there on the nose, but it's not offensive, and I would say that it does improve quite a lot with a bit of time and air. So a subtle but pleasant nose. Let's see how it tastes. On the palate I'm getting some salty oranges. There's a tiny little bit of mild oak spice and some more of those wine gums coming through, probably from those STR casks. A little bit of a lime cordial note, fruit squash, that type of thing, as well as a growing maltiness on the late palate that gets really, really nice. I'm on record as saying that I like any whiskey where you can really taste the barley, you can really taste the malt and the raw materials. I think that it's incredibly important with a whiskey that you don't just cover up things with flavours from the cask. It's so important that you can actually taste the barley and the malt. I think that that's an absolute requirement, and this whiskey has that. It's going to have one more sip. Quite a sweet palate. Very sweet maltiness, sweet, jelly, fruity notes. Quite simple, but with a really nice fruitiness. As for the finish, I'm going to say short-ish, sort of medium short, but very refined, very smooth, with a touch of that malt and stale peatiness. So this one is advertised as a lightly peated whiskey. I'm just going to hold up the details panel. Also say that this is one of 4,323 bottles. Just show you that detail panel there. It's going to be difficult because it's shiny. But this is batch 03 2022, lightly peated STR and bourbon. And that mention of being lightly peated, I think that the only sign of peat on this is probably that slight mustiness on the nose, and towards the end of the finish you get a growing musty, stale, slightly peaty note. But I'd say that it really is lightly peated. If you're the kind of person that doesn't want a peated whiskey, you don't like those overly phenolic or medicinal Islay notes, this one you will be absolutely fine. It's really the lightest of peat that you can get, not even Highland Park levels of peat, but I am glad that it's there. I think that adds an interesting dimension, and I really look forward to seeing how this one develops in terms of the peatiness as it gets a little bit older. But what we've got here, I think that it's very smooth, very refined, kind of similar to the Lindor's whiskey, which I've reviewed already. It's very smooth, almost to a fault. I think that this whiskey from Wireworks, it's clearly young, but at least you can't say that it's immature. As for a grade, this Wireworks from White Peaks Distillery in Derbyshire, I'm going to give it an easy C. So that's bang in the middle of good territory for me. So definitely recommendable. And in particular, I think that if you're looking for a new English whiskey and you're looking for something easygoing, sort of easy drinking, I think that a lot of casual whiskey drinkers in particular will like this a lot. It's really very easy drinking and not immature at all. And I'm really looking forward to seeing where they go next with this, where they take it. Perhaps a little bit more bourbon influence, maybe once they get a little bit more age and maturity, they'll possibly be able to drop those STR casks. Perhaps more peat, perhaps just the same thing but more age. But I think this one's got bags of character, and it's got a lot of tools in its toolbox to develop into something really great with a bit more age. Like a few of these other whiskies, in particular the Wolfburn, I did notice that this whiskey did develop and improve considerably with quite a lot of airing, and that's possibly a young age thing, or possibly the effects of a little bit of bottle shock, because I think that a lot of these whiskies have obviously been bottled recently because they're new releases, so perhaps they just haven't had quite enough time to settle down. But either way, I think this is a great first effort and a very, very smooth whiskey for such a young age, which is really an accomplishment in itself. So yeah, fantastic effort, great start. What's next? Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Cheers.